I used to believe that betrayal arrived loudly, through slammed doors, raised voices, or undeniable proof. I never imagined it could begin so quietly, disguised as politeness and familiarity, slipping into my life without resistance. My husband, Amir, had been busy for months. Work consumed him the way fire consumes oxygen, silently, completely. We still lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, ate at the same table, but somewhere along the way, our conversations became practical instead of personal. He asked if I had paid the bills, not how my day felt. He told me when meetings ran late, not that he missed me. I told myself this was normal. Marriage, after all, was supposed to mature into something calmer, quieter. That was when Saad started appearing more often. Saad was Amir's friend, one of those people who had always been there, at birthdays, weddings, casual dinners. I never thought much about him. He was friendly in a respectful way, always polite, always observant. When Amir was distracted, Saad noticed. When conversations drifted into silence, Saad filled the gaps without effort. It was Saad who first asked if I was okay. The question caught me off guard. We were all standing in the kitchen one evening, Amir rushing through his meal before another late night. Saad lingered behind, helping clear the table. His voice was low, almost careful, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to ask. "You seem tired," he said. "More than usual." I smiled automatically and said I was fine. That answer had become second nature. Still, something about being noticed made my chest tighten. Amir kissed my forehead, grabbed his keys, and left. The door closed behind him, and the house fell quiet. Saad stayed only a few minutes longer, talking about nothing important. When he finally left, I realized I felt less alone than I had all evening. The realization unsettled me. The invitation came a week later, wrapped in complete innocence. Saad messaged me in the afternoon, saying Amir had mentioned I was struggling to find a quiet place to work on a personal project. He had a home office, he said. I could use it anytime. He added that his sister often stopped by too, so it wasn't anything strange. He even ended the message with, "Only if you're comfortable." I stared at my phone longer than I should have. There was nothing inappropriate about the words. Nothing suggestive. Still, my instinct hesitated. I imagined how it would sound if I said it out loud. My husband's friend invited me over. The phrase felt heavier than it should have. When I told Amir that evening, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Yeah, Saad's a good guy," he said. "Do whatever helps you." That should have been reassuring. Instead, it left a hollow space behind his words. The day I went, I told myself it was practical. I dressed modestly, the way I always did. I rehearsed casual conversation in my head, determined to keep everything normal. Saad greeted me at the door with the same respectful distance he always maintained. No lingering looks, no awkwardness. The house was quiet, clean, intentionally neutral. He showed me the office and left me alone to work, exactly as promised. For a while, everything felt harmless. Productive, even. It was the conversation later that shifted something. We sat across from each other with tea growing cold between us. Saad listened in a way I wasn't used to anymore, not waiting for his turn to speak, not distracted. When I talked about feeling invisible, about how marriage had slowly turned me into an afterthought, he didn't interrupt or defend Amir. He simply nodded, as if my feelings made sense. "You deserve to feel seen," he said gently. No one had said that to me in a long time. The moment stretched longer than it should have. I became suddenly aware of the quiet, of how easily silence could turn into something intimate. I stood up too quickly, blaming the time, my responsibilities, anything to break the tension. As I drove home, guilt settled into me like a weight. Nothing had happened. Nothing had crossed a line. And yet, something had changed. I replayed his words again and again, hating how comforting they felt. That night, lying beside Amir as he slept, I realized the danger wasn't in Saad's house or his invitation. It was in how easily I had allowed myself to be understood by someone who was not my husband. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I went back. I told myself I wouldn't go again. That the first visit had been a one-time thing, a practical solution that no longer mattered. For a few days, I ignored Saad's messages entirely. They weren't persistent or demanding, just polite check-ins, spaced far enough apart to feel considerate. "Hope your work is going well." No pressure, just thought I'd ask. What unsettled me was not what he said, but how much I noticed the absence when he didn't say anything at all. At home, Amir remained distant without realizing it. He spoke to me, but never with me. Our conversations were summaries, not exchanges. When I laughed at something on my phone, he didn't ask why. When I grew quiet, he didn't notice. I started to feel as though I was slowly fading from the center of my own marriage, becoming a background detail he assumed would always be there. The second visit happened on a day when the house felt especially heavy. Amir left early, distracted, already late before the morning had even begun. I stood alone in the kitchen after he'd gone, staring at a mug of tea I hadn't touched. Saad's message came then, almost as if he sensed the timing. "You're welcome to come by today if you need the space." I hesitated longer this time, aware that hesitation itself meant something had shifted. Still, I went. I told myself I was choosing clarity, not temptation. Saad greeted me the same way as before, polite, measured, careful not to cross into familiarity. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me more aware of every small thing, the way his eyes softened when he smiled, the way he gave me space without making me feel ignored. We didn't talk much at first. I worked. He stayed in another room. The normalcy almost convinced me I'd imagined the tension the first time. But later, when we sat down with coffee, the conversation returned to the places we had left unexplored. "Do you ever feel like you're expected to be okay?" he asked quietly, "even when you're not?" The question opened something in me that I had kept carefully contained. Words spilled out before I could stop them, about how marriage had taught me to minimize my needs, about how loneliness could exist even beside someone you loved. I didn't say Amir's name often, but it lingered between us anyway. Saad didn't criticize him. That restraint mattered. Instead, he spoke about understanding, about how people drift without meaning to, about how neglect was sometimes quieter than anger. His voice was calm, steady, as if he were offering a perspective rather than a solution. I realized, too late, that I had leaned forward. The space between us felt charged, not with desire yet, but with recognition. I could sense the danger in that recognition, the way it made me feel less alone and more exposed at the same time. When our eyes met, neither of us looked away. The moment broke when my phone vibrated on the table. Amir's name lit up the screen. I pulled back immediately, my heart racing as if I'd been caught doing something forbidden. I answered the call, my voice carefully neutral. Amir asked if I'd eaten, told me he'd be late again. I said I was working, that everything was fine. The lie slid out too easily. After I hung up, silence settled between Saad and me, heavier than before. "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. He nodded, but there was something unreadable in his expression. At the door, he paused as if considering whether to say something more. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more careful than I'd ever heard it. "I don't want to be a problem in your life," he said. "But I don't want you to feel invisible either." The words followed me all the way home. That night, guilt pressed against me from every angle. I replayed the day in fragments, the conversation, the silence, the way my pulse had reacted to his presence. I told myself nothing had happened, yet I couldn't escape the truth that something had begun. I had crossed no physical line, but I had stepped into emotional territory that no longer belonged solely to my marriage. As I lay awake beside Amir, listening to his steady breathing, I realized the most frightening part wasn't what Saad wanted. It was what I had started to want without admitting it to myself. And I knew, with a clarity that terrified me, that if given the chance, I might not be strong enough to stop it next time. I tried to create distance after that. I told myself awareness was enough, that recognizing the danger would keep me from it. For a while, it almost worked. I stopped responding immediately. I filled my days with errands, with noise, with anything that kept my thoughts from drifting back to Saad's quiet house and the way he listened. But awareness doesn't erase desire. It sharpens it. Amir sensed something was off, though he couldn't name it. He asked if I was stressed, if I needed a break. The concern would have meant everything to me months ago. Now it arrived too late, like rain after the soil had already cracked. I assured him I was fine, the same word I had used for so long that it had lost its meaning. The third visit was not planned. I ran into Saad unexpectedly at a cafe near my home. The encounter felt intimate simply because it was unguarded. We exchanged pleasantries that quickly fell away, replaced by the same unspoken pull that had been growing between us. He suggested talking somewhere quieter, just for a few minutes. I should have refused. I didn't. His house felt different this time, not unfamiliar, but charged with memory. I was more aware of myself, of how my presence fit into the space. We didn't sit across from each other. We sat beside each other, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm without touching it. I've been trying to stay away, I admitted before I could stop myself. He turned to look at me, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something gentler. So have I. The honesty disarmed me. It felt like a confession, and confessions demand response. I spoke about the guilt that followed me everywhere, about how wrong it felt to find comfort in someone who wasn't my husband. Saad listened, his expression serious, as if he understood the weight of what we were doing. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said. Especially you. That was the moment my restraint faltered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not temptation but understanding. The line between comfort and closeness blurred until I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. When he reached out, it was slow, deliberate, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. The contact was brief, a hand over mine, fingers tightening slightly, but it carried more meaning than anything physical I had experienced in years. The world seemed to narrow to that single point of connection. I felt seen, chosen, wanted. Then reality rushed back in all at once. I pulled my hand away as if burned, standing abruptly. My heart raced with panic and something dangerously close to relief. Saad didn't try to stop me. That restraint, somehow, made it worse. This can't happen, I said, my voice unsteady. It shouldn't have even reached this point. He nodded, pain flickering across his face before he masked it. I know. I left without looking back. The drive home felt endless. Every red light stretched my nerves tighter, every passing moment giving me more time to replay what had just happened. I hadn't kissed him. I hadn't crossed the line people warned about. But I had crossed my line, the one I had sworn I never would. When I walked into the house, Amir was already there. He was sitting on the couch, waiting. The sight of him, familiar, trusting, unaware, hit me harder than any accusation could have. Guilt flooded through me, sharp and suffocating. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded automatically, then stopped. The lie hovered on my lips, heavy and familiar. I saw how easily I could say it, how easily I could continue living in the space between truth and silence. But something in me had shifted. The weight of what I was hiding made the room feel smaller, the air harder to breathe. Amir looked at me, really looked at me, as if noticing for the first time how far away I seemed. "You've been different," he said quietly. "Have I done something?" The question undid me. I sat down across from him, my hands trembling. I wanted to confess everything, to unload the guilt and let it fall where it may. At the same time, fear tightened around my chest, the fear of destroying what we still had, of hurting him beyond repair. "I don't know how to explain it," I said finally. "But something's wrong. And it's not just you." Amir watched me carefully, the silence between us thick with possibility. I knew that whatever I chose next, truth or secrecy, would shape the rest of our lives. And for the first time since this all began, I understood that the most dangerous betrayal wasn't what I had done with Saad. It was the decision I was about to make now. I didn't sleep that night. Amir lay beside me, turned slightly away, as if giving me space without knowing why. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Saad's hand over mine, felt the echo of a choice I had almost made. I realized then that silence was no longer neutral. It was a decision in itself, one that protected me at the cost of everything else. Morning arrived without relief. Amir moved around the house quietly, carefully, as though afraid of breaking something fragile between us. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I had never heard before. "I feel like I'm losing you," he said. "And I don't know when it started." The honesty in his words stripped away my last excuse. I had told myself I was lonely, neglected, unseen. All of that might have been true. But I had also chosen secrecy instead of confrontation, comfort instead of courage. I sat across from him and felt the full gravity of what confession would mean. I wouldn't just be admitting to an emotional betrayal. I would be forcing him to see himself as the man who hadn't noticed his wife slipping away. That realization hurt almost as much as the fear of losing him. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. The words felt heavy but necessary. I didn't give details that would wound beyond repair. I didn't speak Saad's name at first. I spoke about loneliness, about feeling invisible, about allowing someone else to step into a space that should have belonged to my husband. Amir listened without interrupting, his face pale, his hands clenched together. When I finally admitted who it was, the silence that followed was devastating. "Saad?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. I expected anger. I expected shouting. What I didn't expect was the way his shoulders sagged, as if the weight of everything unsaid had finally settled on him. "I trusted him," Amir said. "And I trusted us." "So did I whispered. "That's why I'm telling you now. Before it goes any further." He turned back to face me, his eyes searching mine for something, remorse, truth, maybe hope. "Did you love him?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. "No," I said, and meant it. But I was starting to love how he made me feel. And that scared me. Amir nodded slowly, absorbing the truth piece by piece. "Then we decide what happens next," he said. "Together, or we admit that we can't." The choice was no longer abstract. It stood between us, clear and unavoidable. I cut all contact with Saad that day. The message was brief, final, and painful. He replied once, acknowledging the boundary without protest. That restraint hurt more than any argument would have. It confirmed that what we shared had been real, but it also confirmed that ending it was necessary. The weeks that followed were not a return to normal. Trust doesn't reappear just because the truth has been spoken. We moved carefully around each other, relearning how to talk without hiding, how to listen without assuming. Some days felt hopeful, others felt unbearably fragile. There were moments when I wondered if honesty had been the right choice, moments when I saw the doubt in Amir's eyes and felt responsible for it. But I also knew that living with a secret would have destroyed us more slowly, and far more completely. One evening, months later, Amir reached for my hand the way he used to, absent-minded and natural. The gesture was small, but it carried something I hadn't felt in a long time, intention. "We're not the same," he said. "But maybe we can be something honest now." I squeezed his hand, understanding finally that love isn't proven by never being tempted, but by what you do when temptation arrives. I don't pretend I was blameless. I crossed lines I should have guarded more fiercely. I learned how easily attention can feel like affection, and how dangerous that confusion can be. But I also learned that facing the truth, before it becomes irreversible, is its own form of courage. Some invitations change nothing. Others reveal everything that was already broken. I was invited into a house that wasn't mine, and for a moment, I almost stayed. What saved me wasn't fear of being caught. It was the decision to stop running from the life I had promised to protect.